So yes, I'm going to be talking about defunding the police, reimagining the role of the police. I'm going to give you some background, some different models that are working or not are being proposed, and different challenges surrounding each of those models. I'm going to start with, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be really providing you with answers. There aren't any easy answers, but hopefully with some food for thought. So this first kind of came on my radar earlier this year, probably in February or March, and I was talking to a high schooler. And they were saying to me, the police should be disbanded. And I was kind of taken aback in my, I consider myself fairly progressive, but I'm also, an upper middle class straight white woman. And I'm like, what do you mean the police should be disbanded? Do you mean disbanded? And the student was like, yes, I mean disbanded. We don't need police. It should all be community policing. The police system is immoral. Therefore, anyone who chooses to work for the police is immoral. And I was taken aback, and I was saying, well, what about murders, and what about rapes, and what about violent crimes, and what about, the police who have, risked their lives to protect us? And, their position was they've bought into this. And so if the police are going and rousting homeless camps and, bolstering up our prison industrial complex and, murdering people of color and terrorizing LGBT people, anyone who is a part of that is complicit. And, it took me a minute. I kind of had to step back and think, okay, well, ideologically, I can see where this person is coming from, but on a practical level, is it practical, and is it fair, and is it true? Is our American police force beyond redemption? Not that all of the individual police officers are bad people or are racist people, but is our institution of American policing beyond redemption? And I kind of let this roll around in my head for a while, but I was thinking, oh, that's not really ever going to happen. That's a pretty radical idea. Well, cue to 2 months later, with the shooting of George Floyd, and suddenly this concept of defunding the police is very mainstream, and people are talking about it openly. And I had to go and apologize to this, this young person and say, okay, well, I guess I am out of the loop and you're in the know. So, and that kind of, I say this by way of introduction to what we're going to talk about today, because while I agreed with a lot of what this person was saying, part of me was like, well, I think that's taking things too far. Isn't there something in the middle that we can do? And what we're going to find today is that there are people all along this spectrum. People who think nothing needs to be done, people who think it should be completely disbanded, people who think the police need to be given more control, and then everything in the middle. And we're going to be running up against this tension between ideology and practicality over and over again as we talk today. So the first thing I wanted to start with was just kind of an overview of the history of policing in the United States. My young friend was correct in many ways. The police in this country have a history as a unit, as an organization, of promoting and sustaining white supremacy. And this started back with slave patrols. It continued on through Reconstruction and, intimidation of Black people. Lynchings. A study in 1933 found that police participated in 50% of the 100 lynchings that they were researching, and stood by and watched in 90% of the rest. So, that's rather terrifying. And people would say, oh, well, that's ancient history. That's 100 years ago. Well, This role of the police enforcing white supremacy continued through the Jim Crow period, through the civil rights movement, and now into today with the war on drugs and our prison industrial complex. So, a lot of people just simply do not view the police as their friend. They do not believe that the police are there to protect and serve them. And while the police are there to protect and serve many, the idea is, well, they should be there to protect and serve all. And so how do we accomplish that? The ACLU just released a research report with some more statistics that I'm going to go over in just a second, but also new ones about, well, what's happened during COVID. What's happened with fatal police shootings since we've all been at home, social distancing, and no one's been out on the streets, and has crime gone down? Have these shootings gone down as crime has gone down? Has people have not been out in the community? And we're going to talk about that as well. So we've discussed before when I've been here with you, and I'm sure most of you know, that the police are more likely to stop, frisk, arrest, jail, and shoot and kill Black people than white, and also Hispanic people, and also Indigenous people. Young unarmed victims of deadly police force are 13 times more likely to be Black than white. A young Black person has a 1 in 1,000 chance of being killed by the police, and in fact, this is the leading cause of death for young Black men, is being killed by the police. And some might say, well, this is also a function of socioeconomic factors. And while that's true to some degree, Black people in affluent areas are almost as likely to be killed as white people in the poorest areas. I'm sorry, are we differentiating between disbanding versus? I am going to be addressing all of those things. Yeah, we're definitely going to be discussing the differences between disbanding, dysfunction, all these different models. Okay. So yes, what the statistics are finding is that socioeconomics do not account for all of this issue, and that if you are Black and in an affluent area, you are almost as likely to be killed as a white person in some of the poorest areas. So what do we think? What they found, they were looking at deadly force statistics from January 2015 through June of 2020. And in that time period, the police shot and killed approximately 5,442 people. That's not an insignificant number of people. This is well more, like multiple times more than civilians who get shot and killed by police in other developed countries. So the statistical breakdown was, while white people make up 60% of our population, roughly, 46% of the people shot and killed by the police were white. So 60% total, 46%, they were 46% of the people who were shot and killed. Whereas Black people, who make up only 13% of our population, represented 24% of those who were shot and killed by the police. It's also important to remember that this doesn't include people who died through other modes. This is only police shootings. It doesn't include people who were killed as a result of police neglect or any other kinds of weapons, or people who were afraid to call the police because they're afraid of being further victimized, and so they die because they haven't received the services that I would have no issue reaching out for myself. So what do we think happened during COVID? Do we think, I know I can't see any of you all, but ask yourselves, do you think that while everyone was predominantly cloistered in their homes, that these fatalities went down? I'd like to see a show of hands, but I can't see you. So I will tell you this, no, mostly it stayed the same. They stayed the same. In a few states, there was a reduction: Illinois, Texas, Michigan, and West Virginia. And then in several states, there was actually an increase. And mind you, this is between only as of June 30th. So this is before things really got started taking off with these protests. Of the states that saw an increase, Florida is one of them. So Florida, from 2015 to 2019, the year-to-date fatal police shootings averaged 30 0.2. However, as of June 30th, in the first 6 months of this year, we have had 46 recorded fatal police shootings. So in the last 5 years, it's been 30 on average for the whole year. In Florida, we've had 46 for the first 6 months of this year. We have the 13th worst record of all of the states with this issue. So entrenched is our problem with overuse of police force that even in the middle of a pandemic, when everyone is staying at home, we can't stop it. So now this is where we want to look at what are these, what are the models, what are some possibilities. One model is the one that my friend recommended. Abolish the police, just disband them completely, let all the citizens take over and police themselves, work on community groups, community policing, neighborhood watch, all of this kind of thing. A place where they're trying to do this is Oakland, California. They recently requested to cut the police budget by 50%. The city agreed to reduce it by 5%. Well, since then, there's been rising violence and crimes committed in the name of police reform, and homicide rates are currently spiking. So what do you do? This becomes one of those pushback moments. What do you do when violence is being perpetrated because you want police reform, but then are the police then supposed to come in and squelch that, or is that counterintuitive to what you're asking? And do you just abandon the city and the businesses to this violence and these crimes? So that is a challenge that comes to this model of abolishment. When can you do that? How can you do that? What do you do about violent crimes? Like I mentioned before, one of the main proponents who considers herself an abolitionist of the police says, I don't know what to do about murders and rapes and pedophilia and other violent crime. So while again, ideologically, it sounds, kind of utopian to say we don't need a police force, we can police ourselves, we can all get along. From a practicality perspective, that's not necessarily proven yet to be viable. And I'm not, taking a position on, should people, demonstrating for huge change, what that should look like. But, at any point in any city, should violence be left unchecked? And if not by the police, who is going to step in to fill that position? Does anyone, well, I don't want to run over time, so I'm going to push through and then I guess hold the questions for the end. Another model, another place where a city where they're, another place where they're considering abolishment is Minneapolis. And they actually committed to dismantling the police department. But in the interim, large swaths of the city have burned, have been destroyed, and 400 people have been shot since the beginning of the year. And this is the highest rate in 5 years. So this again begs the question, okay, is that the time when you come in and abolish the police force? Or if you abolish the police force, would the problem get worse? Or if you abolish the police force, would the problem go away because you gave the people what they wanted? And that's where this tension comes in, and no one knows the answers because it's all hypothetical. Another model is to abolish and reorganize. So Camden, New Jersey has been implemented this model in 2013. Prior to that, Camden was considered the most dangerous city in the world. Crime was skyrocketing. They had open air drug markets everywhere. People were coming in. It was very violent, very dangerous. And so there was a bipartisan effort, very swift and abrupt, came in, just dissolved the city police and the unions. They reorganized, but they didn't stop there. So yes, they abolished their city police, but then they came in and rebuilt it from the ground up, reorganizing under the banner of the county. And they, rather than removing and reducing the size of the police force by separating themselves from the union, they were able to renegotiate salaries, which freed up money, which enabled them to hire hundreds of more police officers. So they kind of went in a different direction. Rather than saying, okay, we want fewer interactions with the police, there's like, okay, well, we're going to bolster the number of people we have working, but we're going to change the philosophy. And so they started focusing on community engagement, on de-escalation training, and changing the ways officers are rewarded and disciplined. They stopped measuring officer success by the number of arrests or by how many tickets were issued. In one exercise, they dropped, this cop off, on a street corner, said, we're going to come pick you up 12 hours later. You're not allowed to arrest anybody. We want you to watch and learn. And if you need to use the bathroom, you got to find a friend who will let you use their bathroom. And if you get hungry, you have to figure out who in the community is a good cook and can help you out. They did all kinds of de-escalation training. They've put a focus on an atmosphere of accountability and transparency. And so they and business owners, they're out there doing cookouts. They're calling business owners and local citizens regularly to say, how are things going for you? How can we help you? And this is a city where people were like, absolutely, we will not call the police because that will only go bad for us. And the reports are it's working. People feel a noticeable change in how the city is operating, how they're interacting with the police. But it came at a big cost, and it was, again, a swift and major change, which would require lots of bipartisan cooperation, which is not easy to come by. It kind of steamrolled the stated interests of a lot of the citizens. It's not what they wanted. They actually took it to court to challenge it and won the case, but it was, by the time it worked through the courts, it was years after the system had already been implemented. So there was nothing that could be done. And the city has not been accountable to reporting the statistics that they promised that they would. So on the surface, it appears to be working, but it's kind of too soon to tell. And we don't have all of the data to back up the anecdotal evidence quite yet. But it does look like it might be a promising model of reimagining the police. In this case, it wasn't defunded, but they did make a radical change by abolishing their local system and rebuilding from the bottom up and radically changing their philosophy. Here in Florida, the ACLU has made recommendations. I guess these are national recommendations. The ACLU recommendations are kind of a combination of factors. They don't think that we should add more police officers. In fact, they think that we should take away police officers. Not all of them, but that there should be far less, and that we should radically limit the number of interactions the police have with the community. And they point to the fact that 80% of arrests in the United States are for misdemeanors, but oftentimes those misdemeanor arrests result in a citizen being killed by the police, escalated to the point where someone is being shot and killed over, like selling cigarettes. Okay, so I have 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna be quick like a bunny. But I think we're actually doing well in terms of timing here. So the ACLU recommends, again, reducing unnecessary police interactions with the community. They recommend bringing in mental health professionals to, intervene in things like, for instance, if I have to Baker Act somebody because I think they're a risk to themselves, I have to call the police. And the last thing someone who is feeling suicidal, especially someone who's a member of a vulnerable community, wants when they're feeling that way is to have the police brought in. And I had to go to college for 7 years plus 1,500 hours of clinical practice to become licensed in what I do. And these poor police officers are being asked to handle behavioral health issues, mental health issues, and that's not their area of expertise. So that doesn't benefit anyone. That doesn't benefit the community, and that does not benefit the police. It puts them in a very precarious situation. The ACLU is calling for the abolishment of qualified immunity so that police officers can be more easily charged with crimes when they overstep the justifiable limits of use of force, and to create independent oversight structures, community review boards, things of this nature, to explore, okay, well, let's see what really happened. How many people are being shot? What is your use of force? Who is complaining about you and what is being done? Those kinds of things. And another is to demilitarize the police and reduce military weapons, including armored vehicles, and introduce, like I said before, unarmed conflict resolution specialists. So what is that looking like in Volusia County? Well, Sheriff Chitwood recently successfully appealed to the county council approval for a fourth armored vehicle, military vehicle. So this is directly opposed to what the ACLU is recommending, but his justification is, okay, well, you have, right-wing violence and left-wing violence erupting all over the country. What are we supposed to do if that comes to our area? And again, it's this ironic, this conflict that's erupted on both sides over we want this reform has resulted in, our sheriff feeling like, okay, we need more militarization to protect against. And he did say the right side and the left side. And he also points out these are vehicles we need during hurricane aftermath. And his concern is that the next administration, however this election goes, could come in and seize all of our federally issued weapons, taking away all of our military grade equipment. And the ACLU's position is that would be a good thing. And the sheriff's position is no, that would not be a good thing. That would be a bad thing because we would be limited in how we can protect people. We have had some meetings. The ACLU Racial Justice Committee has had some meetings with local law enforcement, and they've said, no, we agree with a lot of what you're saying. We don't agree the money should come out of our budgets. We don't necessarily agree with the way you're saying it should be done, but we share these ideologies. And we are currently working on encouraging Volusia and Flagler counties to create citizen review boards for some transparency and community accountability, and also to ask for confirmation of certain written policies. Like, are we allowed to record the police? Yes, legally we are, but do they have that in writing so that people can avoid being arrested and going through years and years of expensive court hearings to prove that, okay, you didn't have the right to arrest me because it's legal for me to record you and make sure that you're following the laws and not abusing your position of power. So that's kind of what's happening in our local level. So those are the models. There are some of the models that are currently being used. I think you can see that these range from completely abolishing the police to just really looking at some different kinds of reform and where the budget money goes. Most people, I think I can confidently say, most people are not suggesting that the police be abolished and the police be completely defunded. Most people, as far as I can tell, white or black, are suggesting some sort of middle of the road, but that definitely our policing system needs to be reimagined and reformed. And so that's my time, and that's what I wanted to share with you. And so now we can open it up for questions.